Barbara Lee, Democrat of California. Congresswoman, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be with you, Joanne. Thank you for keeping it real.
Hey, listen, that's what we try to do. And I want to start with you. I want to start with letting you respond to Donald Trump and all his many tweets. We try not to read his tweets too much on this show, but this one was particularly alarming. So I'm going to read it to you. And he tweets, these media posts will serve as notification to the United States Congress that should Iran strike any U.S. person or target, the United States will quickly and fully strike back, and perhaps in disproportionate manner. Such legal notice is not required, but given nonetheless. First of all, the fact that Donald Trump is saying some media posts and a tweet are notification to Congress is mind-blowing. But the idea that he thinks that that is now his authorization to use force in Iran is terrifying. Your thoughts, Congresswoman?
Sure, this president really, I don't think, understands the Constitution, or he just wants to sidestep it, as we have seen. The Congress is responsible, has a duty to authorize the use of force or not. This is a democracy, Joy. Remember, it's not a dictatorship. And so when this president or any president decides to send our troops into harm's way to conduct military action, he is required by the Constitution to come to Congress so we can debate the costs and consequences of that. Donald Trump doesn't understand that, or he really doesn't care.
And there was a vote last week on a war powers resolution. 4 Republicans even voted for it. Matt Gaetz, even, who's one of Donald Trump's besties, voted for it. Thomas Massie, Congressman Francis of Florida. So a few Republicans even supported it. Your colleague, Congressman Ro Khanna, has talked about the fact that if Donald Trump were to defy Congress and try to start hostilities in Iran anyway, it could be an impeachment article. Your thoughts on that?
Well, sure, because he's, once again, would violate the Constitution. And let me tell you, we have several bills that we're putting forward, Joy, to make sure we further rein in this president. I've been trying to repeal the 2001 and 2002 authorization. This is 20 years later. And so we need to repeal those authorizations and then debate whether or not Congress will authorize the use of force wherever Donald Trump or any president decides they want to conduct military action. Congressman Khanna has legislation that I'm working with him on in terms of co-sponsorship, and the Progressive Caucus and others, to say that you will not, we will not give the administration any funding for the use of force unless they come to Congress and debate the costs and consequences of going to war with Iran. And so we've got to understand that this is a very critical moment in our history. We're less safe than we were before this president conducted these military strikes. He has abused his power, and he has really shown us that he thinks that he is above the law.
And you know, this is one of those rare cases where there is at least some, you know, I think there is an over-obsession with bipartisanship among the media class, to be honest with you. But this is one of those cases where bipartisanship kind of matters because the 2 houses of Congress are in control of different parties. Not only did you have 3 Republicans vote in favor of that war powers resolution in the House, on the Senate side, you actually have a couple of people, these sort of Tea Party-style Republicans, who agree with you on the idea of war powers. Here is Rand Paul. He was on Hardball this week on the idea of Congress versus the president on war. Take a listen.
I do believe that Congress should be the ones making the decisions on whether or not we declare war. I think killing a major general for another country is an act of war. And so I think that there is a possibility if Congress were to come together, Republican and Democrat, and say this is a power too ominous for one person to have.
And then you've got Senator Mike Lee, who's been utterly silent on Trump most of the time, but now coming up and signing on to Bernie Sanders' bill, which would freeze any funding for military action on Iran until there's a vote in Congress. So you have some support on the Senate side, even from some Republicans. Can you see a world in which both houses of Congress actually pass resolutions that finally start to reclaim the war-declaring power for Congress?
I certainly can, Joy, because the use of force, going to war, putting our brave troops in harm's way is not a partisan issue. And over the years, I have worked with many Republicans just to get to this point where we could get bipartisan votes on these issues. And so it's about time that the members of the Senate, Republicans in the House and the Senate, come together to make sure that we express the will of the American people. The people are tired of going to war. They're war weary, and they understand that our national security, requires us to have a strong military. We have that, but it does not require the president to use force as the first course of action. We need to get back to understanding what diplomacy means. Unfortunately, Secretary Pompeo, as Secretary of State, has not assumed his role as the chief diplomat, but rather he seems like he's acting as the defense secretary. And so diplomacy is a strategy that we have to embrace and get back into the nuclear agreement, which this country, the United States, pulled out of. And so this should be a bipartisan issue. The Constitution requires members of Congress to do their job.
Yeah. And I mean, this president in particular is a problematic one to have in his own mind the freedom to declare hostilities and send troops around the world because of his own attitude toward the military, to be blunt. Here is Donald Trump, who's not only been abusive, verbally abusive toward members of the military, including Gold Star families, but also who talks about the military as if they are a mercenary force that he can loan out or sell out to other countries for money. Here is a shocking piece of his Fox News interview with Laura Ingraham this week about the way he thinks about our troops. Take a listen.
We're sending more to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is paying us for it. We're doing something that nobody's ever done. I said to Saudi Arabia, we have a very good relationship with Saudi Arabia. I said, listen, you're a very rich country. You want more troops? I'm going to send them to you, but you've got to pay us. They're paying us. They've already deposited $1 billion in the bank. We are going to help them, but these rich countries have to pay for it.
Congresswoman, California sends more people into the military than any state. I'm not sure if by capita or just in numbers, but in raw numbers, California does. So as a congresswoman with a vested interest, as all Americans would in this issue, can you tell us as a member of Congress, what bank account did Donald Trump allegedly deposit $1 billion from Saudi Arabia into? What bank account would that be? And do you know?
Maybe it's his own bank account. Quite frankly, his comments are very disgusting. As the daughter of a veteran who served in 2 wars, I find his lack of respect and his lack of caring for our troops in a real way. They make many sacrifices for this country. They do exactly what we ask them to do. And here now he is trying to position his position as selling our soldiers as mercenaries to foreign governments. It's outrageous, and I hope the public really understands that this man should be tried and convicted, and he does not deserve to be the commander-in-chief of this United States of America.
Can you anticipate very quickly, could there potentially be a congressional investigation and hearings on whether or not Donald Trump has taken money, whether as president, in his capacity as president, or in some other way, from Saudi Arabia in exchange for sending troops there, and when he's saying things like, we've taken the oil from sovereign foreign countries? Can there be hearings on that?
Joe, I think we should have hearings on that, because this president is using his position for personal gain, and we see this over and over and over again. And so I would encourage our oversight committees, and I'm certainly going to do that when we get back to Washington, D.C., to conduct hearings and to really drill down on what in the world is going on, because we know he has violated the Emoluments Clause over and over and over again, and we know that he is using his office as commander-in-chief, as the president of the United States, for personal gain. And the public understands this, and November is coming, and we have to stay organized, and we have to make sure that we vote and make sure that this man is not the next president of the United States of America, because he does pose a threat to our national security and a threat to our democracy.
Is what you're saying, that you're concerned, just as a member of Congress, that a foreign government, like Saudi Arabia or some other government, is paying Donald Trump, or has paid him, or is putting money in his pocket?
Absolutely, they're paying him. Look at what they're doing in terms of staying at his properties, his hotels. Look at the type of business arrangements this president has with foreign governments. And so now when he's talking about charging Saudi Arabia for our troops and their presence. We have to really see this in totality in terms of how he has used his office for personal gain. And this is just another example of that. And I hope the Congress investigates it thoroughly.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, thank you so much. And thank you for standing so strong on the powers of Congress versus the executive when it comes to matters of war and peace so consistently. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.